I haven't ever talked about this one, but it was either like the second or third supplier that I signed. And this was quite a sentimental moment for me and something I think back on now. It was at the time, it was a really difficult year for me.
You were able to pull strength out of such a difficult position that's then paid you back for years to come. And then you have this feeling as well when you go into a business that it's so uncomfortable, but you want to make people proud.
And I remember my heart was pounding, my voice was like wavering because I was obviously like going through a real emotional period.
I think it's absolutely fascinating that you chose that as your first single action to do when starting a business. I didn't know you'd pick that.
There's a fine balance between entrepreneurs, people who want to be entrepreneurs, and then actual entrepreneurs who create profitable, thriving, successful businesses. That
I had this moment where I put the phone down on the desk and I would just silently cheer to myself. And I had a real celebration for myself after I signed each one.
If you're listening to us and you're thinking, okay, I like it, I'm ready to start, let's do it. I think the best thing you can do is welcome to the Dropship Unlocked Podcast, where we unlock the secrets to high-ticket dropshipping and achieving financial freedom. I'm Lewis Smith, founder of Dropship Unlocked, and I'm joined by James Eardley, client success coach at Dropship Unlocked. Each episode, we'll be sharing our experiences and providing you with the tools you need to build a successful e-commerce empire of your own. From zero to owning £1 million online business, we'll help you achieve the ultimate freedom over your time, location, and financial future. And when we're not recording the podcast episodes or running our own e-commerce businesses, you'll find us helping people like you launch their own high-ticket dropshipping businesses. To learn more about working with us, head over to dropshipunlocked.com/free. Now sit back, relax, and get ready to access your full potential with the Dropship Unlocked podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Dropship Unlocked podcast with myself, James Eardley, and I'm joined today again by our resident e-commerce expert, Lewis Smith. And today we'll be talking about how do you actually get started with launching a dropshipping business in the UK. So it might be for people that are thinking about starting, but they just don't know how to get that over that initial hurdle of taking the first step and actually growing your e-commerce business. So, Lewis, delighted to be joined by you again today. Are you ready to share your expertise with us?
I absolutely am. Yep, looking forward to this one, James, and I'm excited to dive into this topic of how to get started and see if we can help our listeners take those first important, vital steps towards launching a successful dropshipping business, whether that's in the UK like us or anywhere in the world. We'll try and provide you with a mixture of, as much as we can, inspiration, but also those actionable, tactical steps to actually help you go from where you are currently to up and running, making your first few sales and on the path to success with this business model.
Absolutely. So I think from my experience, dropshipping is a great business to get into because you already have everything you need to get started. As long as you've got a laptop, I'd suggest maybe a tablet and an internet connection, then you've got everything you need to start a dropshipping business. So it's not like the other traditional routes you're ready to go from now, but there's still that hurdle to get over of what do I actually do? What step do I take first to get started? So that's what we're going to cover today. So firstly, Lewis, let's kick things off with the fundamentals. What would you say is the first thing that people need to do when they start a dropshipping business?
So in order to get to the point where you're even ready to start a business, the foundations, in my opinion, would be having the right mindset, because there's quite a big shift from being in the employment world where you're an employee and you're given a salary and you're given a set of responsibilities. Transitioning over to being a business owner is a very different mindset, and it will take some adjustment and some adaptation in how you go about that. So a few of the things that come to mind when talking about this mindset shift would be building up resilience, making sure that you reframe problems and obstacles that you will face as just minor setbacks, things that you have to overcome, challenges that you can strive to try to get past. Because if you're in an employee mindset, you might still be in the frame of mind that a challenge is a frustration and something that you'd want to escalate to a senior manager or say, oh, it's not part of my job, I don't do that. But you have to, and we talked about this in other episodes, this concept of extreme ownership. You have to embrace those challenges. You have to embrace the rocky road ahead if you're going down the entrepreneurship path. So having that growth mindset and constantly being open to learning, evolving, and seeing those new challenges as growth opportunities is a great hack. If you can reframe the problems that lay ahead as just mini challenges along your journey to success as an entrepreneur, it will set you up so well for future success, because you will never run out of challenges. You'll always encounter these along your path. And so you have to become okay with figuring them out as you go. One of the other things that we often do as entrepreneurs is get quite distracted by things. So there are always shiny new tools and tactics and people talking about different business models and stuff. And it does become quite difficult to really focus on one thing, especially in this day of social media and distractions on the internet, all the recommendation algorithms on YouTube and Netflix and all of these platforms trying to steal your attention. Sometimes you just need to shut out the noise and say, what are the things that I need to do to achieve the goal that I'm trying to achieve? And it sounds simple, but it is a fine art in this day and age. People are not very good at doing it. And so to set yourself apart as an entrepreneur, you have to find that balance between input and output. I made the mistake myself early on in my entrepreneurial journey where I got overwhelmed, not overwhelmed even, I just got bombarded with inspiration. I used to go to entrepreneur meetups and listen to podcasts, and I used to, because all of that stuff made me feel good. It gave me a dopamine hit of thinking, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm taking in this content, I'm inspired, I'm pumped, I'm ready to go. And so many people do that, but there's a fine balance between entrepreneurs, people who want to be entrepreneurs, and then actual entrepreneurs who create profitable, thriving, successful businesses that change the world. And so if you can make sure that you're not just surrounding yourself with inputs and taking stuff in because it feels good, but instead say, what are the things I need to do today? Shut down distractions, turn off all the devices that are not essential, close all the tabs that you don't need, and just get to it and figure out, what do you need to do? What are the actions that you need to take to get you to the point of output? So when I started, I treated it very much like a job. I said I wanted to set a deadline for when my wife Becky and I were going to quit our jobs and move to Southeast Asia, to move to Chiang Mai, to start living the location independent digital nomad lifestyle. But in order to get to that point, I knew that the business had to be up and running and have at least replaced both of our salaries, right? So I had a clear deadline. I put in long hours, but I relished that pressure. That lit a fire under me, because I thought, well, this is like, I treated it like my one shot at a better life. It was almost like it's now or never. If I don't make this work, it's going to be very difficult for me later on to transition, because the golden handcuffs of employment and all that, the cushy lifestyle that you're in, just get tighter and tighter as your responsibilities increase. So that's the way I went about it. And I think that is a big shift for a lot of people. So those are the foundations that you need to do before we even jump into any of the tactical stuff. Is just making sure that you have that drive of an entrepreneur, that willingness to overcome challenges, and also making sure that you treat it like a job and make sure you set clear expectations and deadlines on yourself to get the task up and running and completed.
Wow, it's so clear from listening back to your story that you said it so clear in your mind that it had to work. And by putting yourself in that mindset from the very start, it's clear looking back at your story that had a huge impact on the way that you made your business work and went on to get to the position you're in now, because you set your mindset from the start. So I think it's absolutely fascinating that you chose that as your first single action to do when starting a business. I didn't know you'd pick that, but the fact that you put mindset as the number one thing, and some people think it's like fluff. We're talking about mindset again, even though we're talking about actionable steps to start a business. But quite simply, it must be the foundations, and you must think that as well. For all of the actions you take, all come from the position where your mindset is in. So it's fascinating that you've chosen that. So on that point then, I guess, why do you think it's so important? Why have you chosen it as the first thing really to think about when launching a new business?
Well, it's just the thing that underpins everything else. If you have the right mindset, and I think the way that I used to think about it was that the penny drop moment that I had was, I don't have all the answers right now, but there was one day, and I remember this specific grey meeting room that I was sitting in, and I was looking outside at the bright day outside, and I was in this very clinical, sterile meeting room, and I just thought, I don't have the answers, but I've now made the decision that I'm going to acquire the answers. And it's a really difficult one to encapsulate verbally, because you almost have to experience it. But hopefully what we're doing with this podcast is providing you with enough ammunition so that one day, one of you, at least if we can do this for one person, then it's been worth doing all of these episodes, is that you have that same moment where you think, oh, I'm doing this. Get out my way. I'm figuring these challenges out. And whilst I may not have the answers now, I'm now on a path to figuring them out, and I'm going to get around a community of other people who've already done them so I can learn from their experiences. So it's just making sure that you go into business with that positive mindset, because if you come into this with an air of expectation, or, hey, I want everything to go smoothly, or do it for me, or I want to blame someone if something goes wrong, you're only setting yourself up for failure down the line. So this is why we always say that this is really the foundation and the fundamental aspect of becoming a successful long-term entrepreneur. And that openness and willing to learn is so important. For example, when I first started in e-commerce, I started with the lower ticket, selling cheap products from China model that a lot of people fall into the trap of. And I think the most dangerous thing with that model is that it does work to an extent, because if it just didn't work, people wouldn't get tempted to do it. And then it would just be like, well, but the trouble is you do make some sales with it. Now, trying to actually make profit when you've got those long 30-day delivery times, very low quality products, often with no quality assurance, no ability to return, lots of chargebacks, refunds, so many problems associated with it. But when I had the open-mindedness to say, well, there might be a better model out there. For example, the model we now use, which is the Home Turf Advantage model, which is where we sell higher ticket items using Google Shopping. When I first went into that model, it felt like a risk, because it wasn't a clearly defined model here in the UK that I knew of people doing. So I had to rely on data, I had to rely on teachings, I had to rely on mentors. And when I made my first 2 sales in one of the first afternoons of running ads, I think it was maybe like a week into running ads or something, very, very early on, I was in bed ill on that day. And my phone just went ching, and it was like a £900 order. And then another one about half an hour later. That solidified in my mind that the openness to change and innovation was so important as an entrepreneur, because that moment solidified in my mind that had I not made this change into a better model, I would still probably to this day, if I hadn't given up by now, be trying to patch over and fix the old broken model of low ticket dropshipping from China.
Yeah, it's so true. You've got to have that mixture of both perseverance and pushing through difficult times. And you've got to mix that with also the adaptability to change if you're going down the route that you can see clearly isn't going to be successful for you. And it's that struggle that we have as entrepreneurs to go between the two. Persevere, be stubborn in the face of any difficult times, but at the same time adapt if you're going down the wrong model, which it sounds like you were, and I know I was. And it's so true that we have to get our mindset in the right place as a first and foremost step. And when I reflect on starting my own business, I know for a fact that had I not had this in place, I'd still be up at night longing for my own business, and I wouldn't be in the position I am today. So these sort of stories about perseverance, it reminds me of a story I read recently about Elon Musk and SpaceX. So initially he put all his money into the company and took loans out, massive loans to keep this company running, SpaceX initially. But after 3 failed attempts, the 4th launch of the Falcon 1 rocket from SpaceX, which was critical to the company's future, that failed just 29 seconds into the flight. So that's the 4th setback he's had, and it's a major setback for him. But Elon Musk refused to give up despite this, rallied his team, and then worked tirelessly to fix the problems that they had. So then less than a year later, SpaceX was then go on to successfully launch the Falcon 1 rocket into orbit. And obviously since then, it's now become the most successful private space exploration company in the world. So, just in a story that I heard recently, but it shows the power of perseverance when you're going after the right goals. And so having that in place is huge, definitely. So now we've got our mindsets in the right place, and that's the first step, that we've got the foundation set up. Can you walk us through sort of the first step that somebody would take in terms of actually getting their UK or anywhere in the world dropshipping business started?
Yeah, definitely. So the first thing is choosing the right model of dropshipping that works best for you. I say right model because there are many that work. For example, you could set up a website, and then when a customer orders, you go and then find that product on Amazon, have it shipped to the customer, and then hope that they don't put Amazon packaging on it, and then you make the difference between what you sourced it for. Right. That is technically dropshipping, and yes, to an extent it does work. Is it a sustainable method? In my opinion, no. It's not building a long-term business. It's playing an arbitrage game right between the two. Now, with high-ticket dropshipping, where you are running the business, you're an authorized retailer for your suppliers and brands that you sell for, it's much more sustainable. You're building an asset that's a long-term, eventually saleable asset. You could even choose to sell that business if you desired down the line. The other thing that you can do with high ticket dropshipping is every order that you make, you're making a higher margin on it overall in terms of pounds of profit that go into the bank. So because you're making a higher profit per order, you need less orders or fewer orders to meet your overall income goals. The other thing that does is reduces the admin load on you as a solo entrepreneur when you're first starting out. You probably don't have this huge team of customer support advisors at your disposal when you first start. So making sure that you create something that works with your current lifestyle, especially if you're balancing this with another job and doing it as a side hustle, you need to make sure that you pick the right model from the outset that fits the type of business you want to build. We hear of so many entrepreneurs who show up in our program because they created a business that they hated in the previous model that they were using. So it's just having that clarity over the business model really helps you as you then go and proceed down the line, because you know why you picked the model. I think for me, the moment that I figured out why the high ticket dropshipping model was the one I was going to go all in on was when I just did the maths, and I figured out that if I sold items at £2,000 instead of these like £10 widgets from China often, if it was £2,000 per item and I made 30% profit margin, which is fairly typical in the world of high ticket dropshipping, that's £600 profit per item, right? So it's one sale, £600 profit in the bank for the business. I only needed 16 orders per month to hit £10,000 in profit per month, right? So that's roughly one order every other day. So that, I think, is the first realization that I had where I thought, oh, well, that's so much easier. If I can just make 16 orders a month at £2,000 an item, I'm at 10K, and I've only got to keep 16 people happy to run that business. I can send 16 emails per month myself, even if I did it manually, right? Which when you first start, that probably is the way you'll be doing it until you hire a virtual assistant, which, by the way, when you're making 10 grand a month, you can easily hire your first virtual assistant just a few months in. The other thing that you have to overcome is, does selling a £2,000 product take any more effort than selling a 10 or a 20 or a £30 product? The answer you might think is, well, of course it does. But the reality is usually not. Usually, if I look at my phone and see a Shopify notification for an order of £2,000, no more work went into generating that sale. I mean, sometimes they might call the business and the VA will just answer the phone. Or if you're first starting out, you might answer the phone and just help them with any questions that you have. And by the way, you don't need to be a product expert on the products you're selling because you have your suppliers there. So you can just say, thanks for your question. Let me get back to you later on if that's okay. I'll find out the answer for you. So I think people oftentimes fear the higher ticket sales because they feel that so much more needs to go into it. But I went for a walk one evening when I was first starting out, and I just was walking around these nice, really like high-end roads around London, and I was looking at all the things that I saw. I was wearing what I now refer to as the niche research glasses. So I was like viewing everything through this lens of, would that be a viable high ticket dropshipping niche? Could I build a business around that? And I just remember looking at a couple of these huge houses and just seeing all the things that they would have purchased, probably online, probably without ever calling a single company. So for example, things like the electric gates on the front of a house, well, those are going to be in multiples of thousands, right? And they probably came from an e-commerce store. Or the planter pots where they had these huge ornate trees out the front of their houses. Some of these things were huge. And I thought, well, that again, it could probably cost in the hundreds, if not thousands. Some of the elaborate front doors that they have, or these really nice letterboxes that you get on these premium mansions, all kinds of stuff. That one had a really ornate clock above their 5-car garage, that was there. And I just thought, well, all of these things have come from an e-commerce store, and someone had to decide at one point to build a business around selling them. So once you can get out of the mindset of, oh, I wouldn't spend £2,000 on a water feature for my front garden, but someone out there will, you get in front of the demand of the people who are already buying those items and have the money, you have your business up and running in no time.
Yeah, it's amazing the power of those hypothetical niche research glasses that you put on. As soon as you start thinking about selling high ticket products and you go for a walk around, you see so many opportunities everywhere you go of high ticket products that somebody must be selling online to these people. And yeah, fascinated to hear about how you went around London and you could start to see those opportunities everywhere around you as soon as you switch into the mindset. And it was the same for me. This is the first thing that really appealed to me about high ticket dropshipping, was that when I first started, I knew I had the choice of all these different business models, but I may as well make sure the numbers are completely on my side and they're very forgiving with the high ticket dropshipping business model. So that's why I knew that had to be the one for me. So now that we've got the mindset, we've decided on the high ticket dropshipping business model or a business model you've got in mind. What's now the next step that somebody can do and take action from this podcast in terms of getting their company now set up?
Yeah, so the registration of a company, we believe that it's quite an important thing for some reasons that I'll go into. But registering a company, people think is this like huge, elaborate, big life decision where you have to go in and sit down, in an office in London and sign these documents and cut the ribbon. It's this huge event that has to unfold. The reality is you can do it online in about 10 minutes and it will cost you £12. It really doesn't take very long. So I remember the afternoon that I first did that and I thought, wow, I've just done something that I'd always dreamt of, which is become a business owner, become a director. And I did, and it was a lot easier and more straightforward than I realized. Right. And if you don't want to do it yourself, then there are websites that will do it for you, these formation agents that will guide you through the process, but very cheap still. So some of the advantages of a limited company structure are that it facilitates the process of actually signing suppliers when you get to that point. So oftentimes, if you're operating as a sole trader, right, so you're just operating in business personally, which you can do and some people do, but when it comes time to trying to sign the more serious suppliers and you call them and you say, hi, I'm so-and-so from this business, I want to start working with you and selling your products. And they say, okay, what's your company details? And you say, oh, no, it's just me personally doing this. It's not the most professional front to be going to them with. If you can say, here's our limited company, here's how long we've been in business, this is how we work, this is how we operate, it just sounds more professional. It gives them more trust signals to put their faith of supplying you as one of their authorized retailers in you. So that's one of the reasons. The other thing is that it provides a clear legal separation in terms of liability between the company assets and your personal assets. So early on in my journey, I made some pretty big mistakes because I was figuring a lot of this stuff out on the fly and doing it live, trying to learn from my mistakes as quickly as possible. And we made some oversights in terms of marketing spend. And I've talked about this previously, but we very, very nearly went out of business. We didn't, and I managed to claw it back. And over time, I did manage to recover the money that we were in debt to suppliers by generating more sales and growing the business and getting to the point where we had tens of thousands in the bank that we could then save for a rainy day if ever anything like that happened again. But had the worst come to the worst at that point, had it got to the point where we literally had to go under, none of my personal assets were on the line because there was a clear separation between the company and the director. Now, this is something that, full disclaimer, we're not legal experts, we're not accountants. Like, this is something that you'd want to seek legal advice on if ever you were in this situation. But one of the important things for me was knowing that I acted responsibly, but even if you fail, the limited company structure is there to allow entrepreneurs to have a go, to take risks, to try. If I had to put my family's home on the line and my personal assets on the line in order to take a risk, very few entrepreneurs would get started because the risk is too big to do that. If you can just make sure that you have those clearly separated, so your company assets are in a limited company and you're personally acting as the director, but you're not underwriting things in your own name, it just means that as long as you don't act negligently as the director of that company, and if anything did eventually go wrong and the company had to go under, you yourself, your family, home are not at risk. Your own assets are not at risk. And that's just a nice, clear line, I think, that we're allowed to draw as entrepreneurs that allow us to take some of those risks and have a go at starting businesses. So the other thing, once you have your company registered, is you need to have the right structures in place to actually start accepting money. And so the next thing we'd do is start a business bank account, open up a business bank account so that there was somewhere for the money from the sales. And if we're using an e-commerce platform or a payment gateway, where do those customer funds come to? Well, I made the mistake early on of choosing a more traditional bank, should we say. I won't name and shame them on the episode, but when I was living in Thailand, the bank that I had chosen was very traditional, and they required directors to go into branch and to sign things and to be there personally. And if we wanted anything different, we had to pop into branch, and we had to, and that sounds convenient. They say, oh, just pop into branch. But what that doesn't take into consideration is if you're a digital nomad living on the other side of the planet and you're hardly even awake during UK business hours when the phone lines are open, it's quite difficult to get the support you need. So we transitioned over to a more online bank. And actually, one of the banks that we recommend now is a bank called Tide. So if you head to dropshipunlocked.com/tide, we actually have a partnership with them whereby they'll give you £50 for just signing up for an account with them. So that's definitely something to consider. And the reason that we recommend Tide is because they're really digital friendly, should we say. You can set up an account online. You don't have to go into any branches. They plug and play straight into a lot of these e-commerce platforms, and they're a very 21st century forward-thinking digital age bank, right? So that's why we suggest using a more forward-thinking bank like that.
Great. So it is almost as simple as that in a way. It's registering a company, in half an hour for £12, and then setting up a business bank account, which we can do with a digital bank. So you can do it all online now as well. So from a laptop in one afternoon, you can have your company set up and your business bank account. And you've even thrown in a £50 bonus as well, if anyone joins using the Tide link that you've got as well. So there you go. That's about as actionable as we can make it in terms of getting people to be able to start these businesses. So now you've got yourself set up with the foundations. How can we then push on to decide maybe which products we're going to sell within this high ticket dropshipping business model?
We believe that choosing the right products to sell should be a combination of different data points. And several of those data points can also be whether you are interested in selling the item. So don't feel that it's solely a data-driven decision and that there's no possible scenario in which you can still be passionate about your company. You can be, absolutely. But if we go into a business led by our passions, we're often blinded to the possibility that it might not work out. So we try to make sure all of the decisions are data-driven and that the validation criteria that we set out are met. So for example, there should be sufficient customer demand. There are tools that we can use to assess the level of monthly search volume for a certain product group or niche to ensure that it does meet that criteria and that you're not going to be launching a store selling products to a market that doesn't want them. The other thing are that we would look for things like consistent pricing. So are the prices of the items the same across all retailers, or are there some retailers who undercut massively on price, therefore making it quite difficult for you to compete, because you don't want a race to the bottom when you're trying to market your products, and just trying to sell based on discounting the price is not really a long-term winning strategy. The other thing is making sure that it fits the high price, high ticket criteria. So we talked earlier about £2,000 items, and then also selling £10 items. You have to sell a lot more £10 items to make the same target income in net profit at the end of the month. So pick something where you make a higher profit per sale. We typically recommend items of £300, £400, £500 and above. We had a member just the other day make their first sale, and it was something like £7,000. I think we read it out on one of the last episodes. So just making sure that it fits those criteria will ensure that you pick the right niche. So you can brainstorm ideas. We often have people, when they first join the program, our members will just sit down and put together a list of 50 different ideas. Some of the techniques we offer to do that, for example, go out for a walk. Just take your phone out or a notepad and just jot down things you see. Like I mentioned on that walk in London in that evening, that I was inspired by things to sell. So something we have in our program is oftentimes members will come to us with their eyes set on selling a specific product. They'll show up on day one and they'll say, I think I'm going to go into, the beauty niche, for example, and I've got these hair care products. My friend makes them or sells them or has some involvement with the company. Those are the ones I want to sell. I know that my friends all like them and they would buy them, so I think it's definitely going to work. That's always really like alarm bells go off for me at that point, because I never want to shatter someone's dream, but at the same time, I know that that doesn't meet a lot of the criteria in our model. So I say, well, look, do you want a proven model that works for the reasons that I mentioned earlier, the high ticket, high profit, easy returns, low stress, low maintenance model? Or do you want to have a go with a completely different model? Because if you do, we're not the people to come to for that. But if you want to open your mind to let the data guide you, and you're not so wedded to one particular product when you first start as an entrepreneur, you can still overlay your passions on that short list of products that you come to. And there will be a few there that you think, I could get really passionate about that. What happens is the members that came to our program with that in mind, but opened their mind to doing things in the data-driven way, now all have thriving businesses because they overlaid their passion on an already proven data set and working model. So oftentimes they'll become very passionate about the business because the business is profitable. And if they really want to go and launch that other business that they first came to us with the idea of, they now have profits in the bank that they could use to fund the next business using a different type of model. Maybe it's private labeling, maybe it's Amazon FBA, and they don't have to take a huge loan out and take a load of risk in order to do that because they now have the profit there in order to build that foundation upon.
And that's a much better way to go about it. And it is easy to try and follow a passion or try and follow something that you already think you know will work. But by following the data and by going through the criteria that you just set out, it's really going to help out. And at this stage, I think it's important now to remind ourselves about having the mindset in place, because you don't really need too much perseverance or mindset to get your business set up and your bank account. But now choosing the niche that you're going to go into and choosing the right products, that's when you'll tie back into the initial point with making sure you're going about this for the right reasons and you've got a strong reason why you're starting this business. So when it gets a bit difficult and you're crunching the numbers and you're working out which products to sell from the data that you're researching, this is when you can go back in and realize why you're doing this in the first place, realign to that and then keep pushing on. So let's say we've been through the criteria that you've mentioned, Lewis, and let's say, for example, the barbecue niche and barbecues meet all the criteria. There's enough demand. There's other people selling them that you can see in your marketplace, and all the other criteria have been hit. How do we now go about deciding on barbecues to sell and then actually start selling them? What's the next step we need to take?
Well, yes, we would use the validation criteria to find our finalist niche ideas that did all meet the criteria. So there's about 9 different data sets. We probably can't go into all of them now because we'd be here all day, but we do have hours and hours of walkthrough, actionable, over-the-shoulder content where I'm doing live research on the computer, and it's like you're sitting at the desk next to me, looking at my screen, and I'm saying, here's how you do this, here's how you research demand, here's how you look for competitors, here's how you find suppliers. So I'm giving actual examples in there. So if that's helpful, then that's definitely part of it. And so once you've decided on, here are the products that I'm going to sell, this is how I'm going to move ahead with my business, you've then got to begin the process of starting to be able to sell those items. So what we do is build an online store, and the platform we use is Shopify. So again, if you head over to dropshipunlocked.com/Shopify, you can get a free trial of Shopify, and I think you get 3 months of Shopify for just £1 per month as well. So, I mean, try it for £3 for 3 months and see. But if you go to that and sign up, you'll see what I mean. It's very drag and drop. Shopify is possibly the leading e-commerce platform globally right now. They're growing so rapidly and they have so much support, infrastructure, apps. It's just a great system. It's all in one. It's just there. It works. We've built all of our stores using it, and really there's no need to overcomplicate things. People often say, I could use a different platform because, for this reason and that reason, but really some of the biggest e-commerce brands in the world use Shopify. So there is no reason to go elsewhere, in my opinion. So what we do is, once we've decided on using Shopify, we then build a minimum viable store, or MVS as we call it in our program. And so it's easy as an entrepreneur when you're first starting out to want this perfect, amazing, complex, elaborate store. But something I realized early on was that I'm not a web developer. I'm not a web designer. Probably got better at it over the years of doing this. But when I first started out, I definitely wasn't. So having a platform like Shopify, where it's easy to make something look very high-end and professional and put you on a level playing field with some of the top brands in your industry, the top retailers, you don't need to overcomplicate it. The nice thing is with Shopify, it's great to get something simple and fast and working up and running so that you can generate sales, keep it simple, because oftentimes simple converts best anyway. You'll get customers purchasing from you because you don't have an overly complex layout on your site. And what you can do is use the profits that you generate from those sales later to hire developers or Shopify branding experts who can come in and maybe use a paid theme or maybe use more advanced technology for your site and make it look really good. But to start with, using a basic free Shopify theme to make it trustworthy, to make it easy to use, professional, you can make it appeal to customers, but also to suppliers. Because remember, we haven't contacted suppliers at this stage. We've just validated our market, and we're building this store so that we can go and show suppliers our demo MVS website before we even launch.
Look, this is a really important point that you make, and it's great news for people that are thinking about starting, that you don't need to have a perfect store when you get up and running. If you've never built a website before, within a week, you can have, by using a Shopify template, you can have a very professional, simple store set up that you can then use to go and sign suppliers and make your first sales. And I definitely fell into that trap of wanting my store to be perfect and look amazing when I first started. But you were very clear following the program that, look, let's just get it done. Let's not worry about perfection. And then we can work on perfection later. Once you've, although there's no such thing as perfection, once you've got the first few profits back from your first few sales, you can then reinvest that into building a nicer looking store. But to get started with, let's not get carried away. Let's not procrastinate about making an amazing looking store. Just get a simple template set up and then you're away and ready to start. So with that in mind, we've got the store built now at this point. So is that now the point where we're going to go and talk to suppliers?
Yeah, generally that would be the time where we would approach suppliers. And there's a whole process around this. There are scripts that we've perfected for the UK market that are all available inside the Dropship Unlocked program on how to actually approach and convince these suppliers to work with us. But ultimately, the way that we position it is that they need us, right? We're doing them a favor because without us, they wouldn't really have a route to market. The suppliers that we approach typically aren't selling items directly on their own websites, if they even have websites, to customers. So their route to market is through retailers like us. We come in to ensure that we take on some of that customer service support that their customers are looking for, but also ensuring that we generate them additional revenue streams that they don't have already and expand their market reach. So the initial way I'd advise contacting suppliers, if you can, is by phone. And actually in person is sometimes even better, but by phone I think is the best way, because if you have to email them and there's no way of getting them on the phone, then that can be a good third option. But really the phone call is the way that you can show that you're a real person, because they must get approached by so many time wasters and people that are not serious and are going to tarnish their brand's reputation and just want to take their products and throw them up on eBay and put a discounted price on them. And you can imagine, as a supplier, as a brand, you wouldn't want to work with a retailer who had those short-term goals for just making a bit of money at the expense of your brand's reputation. So it's understandable. So we just have to show them we're good people, we want to do well in business, we want to make you do well in business, and we want to have happy customers that want to continue to buy from us for years to come. We're here for the long run and we're going to become the experts in our market. So when you first call suppliers, I remember having to balance this with having my job at the time, and I had this supplier that I wanted to call. I think it was my first ever supplier that I wanted to sign, and on my lunch break at work I popped out and sat in my car in the car park at work. And I made a call to my first supplier, and I remember I was really nervous, because you've never done this at this point, right? So it's almost like a shift in your own identity. You don't yet identify as a business owner, as a director. So it's quite difficult to put that hat on and build up the confidence to call them. But I did it. I had a chat and I just thought, look, I'm going to help this company out eventually. So it's in their interest to work with me. And they did. They signed. And I remember going back into work and just thinking, wow, that's the first step. I've made it. I'm now a legitimate business owner with a supplier whose products I can sell. And that was really cool. And I haven't ever talked about this one, but this was it was either like the second or third supplier that I signed. And this was quite a sentimental moment for me, and something I think back on now. It was at the time, it was a really difficult year for me. My grandmother had just passed away. And I remember a few days before she passed away, we sat and had this 3-hour conversation one afternoon. And we really, I was just talking to her about things and what my plans were and the business and stuff. And just we were just chatting. She showed genuine interest in what I was doing. And I just remember telling her all of these plans, and we were going to sign suppliers and we were going to launch this cool business, and it was all online. And I think she kind of half understood what I was referring to, but maybe half was just humoring me. And anyway, she passed away in the coming days. And a few days later, my parents were in her house and they were clearing out all of her belongings, going through that difficult process, of taking, tidying up the house and everything ready for it to be sold or whatever. And I just remember thinking, well, I've got this supplier that I want to sign. It's obviously a really sad day. I'm not being much use here because there's being sofas being carried past me and, stuff moving around, and you're just in that kind of weird emotional state where you're really sad and down. But I also wanted to make her proud. I wanted to do something that I thought, I've told her about this. She was excited about this and I want to see it through to completion. So I went outside, sat in my car again, and I just thought, I'm going to call this supplier, who were quite a big one in my industry, and just speak to them and see if I can sign them. And I remember my heart was pounding, my voice was wavering, because I was obviously going through a real emotional period. And I just had the conversation and I got straight through to the business owner of this supplier. I explained our model on what we were going to do. And he said, yeah, absolutely. We'd love to work with you. I think that would be really good. And I just couldn't believe it. When I got out, I just thought it was almost like she was looking down on me and saying like, this is the right step to be making. Because looking back now, that supplier and the 2 that I signed around that week have literally generated us millions of pounds in sales since doing that back in whenever it was, 5-6 years ago. So having that ability to just step up to the plate when it really matters, whatever your inspiration is, whatever your motivation is, have that belief that you are worth it. You are the business owner. You are the person that deserves this. Make that call, step up to the plate. And I promise you, in years from now, you'll look back and think, I'm so grateful that I did that and took that first step.
Wow, what a great story. I think as well, you were able to pull strength out of such a difficult position that's then paid you back for years to come. So, it's an inspirational story. And I know I've had a loss recently in my family as well, my grandpa passing away. And then you have this feeling as well when you go into a business that it's so uncomfortable, but you want to make people proud of you. And I think you probably had that around in your family as well. And that's that strength that we can pull from these difficult experiences to go on and go and achieve our goals is amazing. And obviously you've harnessed that and made an important call that day. And when you do first call suppliers on this point as well, it is really quite scary when you first pick up the phone and speak to a supplier and you're not confident with speaking with them on the phone. But if you can tap into what's really important and how calling this supplier is a means to an end for your big goals at the end, then it just becomes a no-brainer that you'll pick up the phone, you'll speak to the supplier, you'll get them signed, and then you can reap the rewards for months and years to come. So my own personal experience of signing suppliers was obviously phone calls are the way that we always advise. So it was always a phone call. I get them signed up and I set out a week where I took a week off work. And I knew that I was going to be signing suppliers all week. And that was my absolute chief aim for the week. And for me, this moment I remember clearly was after I put the phone down on any supplier that I just signed on the phone, I had this moment where I put the phone down on the desk and I would just silently cheer to myself. And I had a real celebration for myself after I signed each one. And I remember looking down at my dog who was sat in the same room as me while I was on this phone, looking up at me thinking I was absolutely crazy because I was, almost jumping around, cheering because I'd signed these suppliers because it's such a huge moment. And it's where, as we go through this process, this really starts to feel real now. It's really exciting. We've got suppliers on board. Other people other than yourself and your immediate family know that you've started a business, know that it's real. And then you can get these live products onto your store and start selling. So we've got the suppliers signed. We've got the products now that they've told us we can sell. How do we go about selling them and starting to make a profit for ourselves?
Yeah, this is where it becomes real. And like you say, you take that jump from, okay, this idea has now come to fruition. We have suppliers signed. We have a store built. It's tempting at this point to, like I said earlier, almost celebrate and take that dopamine hit of like, I've become an entrepreneur. I've done it. But you've got to remind yourself, you're not there yet, right? We've got to start making sales. We've got to make this thing profitable. It feels good to have reached this stage and you're right to celebrate. But what we see people do is almost celebrate too early before they really start diving into it. So at this stage, you are still wearing all the hats. You are still the marketing manager, the head of sales. So let's make some sales. So the way we do that is we typically go where the demand already is. If somebody is searching for a set of electric gates right in their driveway or a water feature or a clock to go above their 5-car garage, whatever it is, they're going to probably search for that item on a search engine so they can find the right one, right? So we just run ads on Google, the biggest search engine, to get those items in front of people. We use the Google Shopping Network in order to do that. So when you search on Google for buy horse saddle, for example, you'll see at the top, there's a list of photo ads with prices. Those are Google Shopping ads or product listing ads, they call them. So one of the ways that we do this now, which actually leverages more of Google search engine and ads than just the basic product listing Google Shopping ads, is a type of campaign called Google Performance Max campaigns. Now, these are really cool. We dive into these with hours of content in the program, so we won't go through exactly how we're doing this in this episode. But just know that it's a great, very powerful campaign type, but it needs to be set up in a specific way tailored to this type of model. So we go through all of that. We determine a daily budget. So we find something that is manageable from our savings over the course of 30 days. So for example, we might say, okay, I'm willing to spend £20 per day on ads or £30 per day on ads and let it run for at least 30 days. That's typically what we suggest doing before you make any changes or tweaks to your budget, to your target return on ad spend, and just let it play out. Because at that point, for the first 30 days, Google Ads is just collecting data. It's figuring out on a real-time machine learning AI basis, if I send somebody who searched for buy horse saddle to this page, how long do they stay on the page? From what devices are they most likely to then purchase a product? How interested are they? Do they then go to 3 other sites with the same product? They're trying to figure out all of these things. So you just have to let it do its work. And it's a bit of a nerve-wracking and time-consuming process because it's tempting to just keep logging into the campaigns and watching them, but you really have to just let it play out. Now, when I first started running ads, I did so too soon. That might sound weird because you'd think, well, when you first sign your supplier, don't you just run ads straight away? But what I realized once I had several suppliers signed is that you can't force an unpopular set of products on a market just by running ads to it. That will just cost you lots of money because the ads will still show and they'll get clicked. But if there's a reason why your customers aren't purchasing those products, you don't want to just be pouring money into Google Ads. So I suggest now that you sign at least your first 4 or 5, preferably suppliers, have all of their products uploaded, optimized, and we guide you through how to do that specifically so that they're in a format that they will likely sell in. Then you run ads and you let the machine learning algorithm of Google Performance Max campaigns do its thing for 30 days. At that point, you will start to make sales. As long as you've ticked the pre-store launch checklist boxes that we go through in our program before you go live, then you've set everything up for success and you'll start to see sales. And of course, we'll work with you if there's any reason why you're not, and we'll usually be able to troubleshoot that for you on one of our Q&A calls in the program. But one of the things that we see people do is jump in too early to running ads, and they say, oh, I've launched ads last week and I've not made any sales. And then we say, well, how many suppliers do you have? Oh, well, just 2. And how many products? Just 5. You know, you only have 1 in 5 chances if it's only 5 products live on your store to make sales. If you're just peppering people with ads for those 5 products, if they're not popular for some reason, then it's not going to be a long-term way to scale your brand. So I'd pause your campaigns and I would make sure that everything's set up in the right way. Get your brands live, organize your ad account in the way that we go through, where you break everything down, calculate your numbers. So we'd want to know our break-even target or our break-even return on ad spend and our target return on ad spend. So 2 calculations that we'd run you through exactly how to do, and then get to the point where you can let the campaign start to optimize towards achieving that. So the way I explain target return on ad spend is a bit like if you have a machine that you put £1 in, so you take your pound coin and you slot it in and it gives you £10 out, you've just achieved a 10 times return on ad spend, right? Because you put £1 in and you got 10 out. So if you're happy with that, are you going to put another £1 in to the machine? Of course you are. £1 in, £10 note comes out. You're just going to keep putting £1 in, right? That's the point where you know that as long as that keeps happening, you're okay to scale because you're scaling profitably. You're not just scaling the top line, you're actually scaling the profit of the business as well. So we've got hours of over-the-shoulder walkthrough training on this stuff. We hold your hand through the process. So if you're thinking, that all sounds very numbers-centric and I'm not really a numbers person, that was me. So don't fear. Like honestly, I've generated £4.5 million in sales through using that method alone now, and I can guide you through step by step how we do that every single time to make sure that it works reliably and profitably.
Yeah, it's a lot to go through how to set up your Google Ads on a podcast, and it's probably not possible without actually looking over the shoulder at clicking the different options. But what I think people need to realize is that we're always setting up our business in a way that it's going to be a lifestyle business for us. So the Google Ads method that we use, so using a Performance Max campaign, is deliberately hands-off, and we allow Google to optimize for us using its machine learning capabilities. And it has so many more skills that we could ever possibly describe or learn for ourselves. So we choose deliberately Google Performance Max campaigns because it will do the learning for us, and it will choose where to show our ads to give us the best possible return on our ad spend. So we set up our ads, we set the numbers that we need to receive in order for us to be running a profitable campaign. And then we adjust the ad campaign until it is achieving that profitable return on ad spend for us. So once we've got ourselves to the point, we've allowed time for the data to come in, we've optimized our ad campaign so that we are achieving a profitable return on our ad spend. How can we scale now to a point where we can leave our jobs and we can achieve the goals that we set out when we first started and we're making £10,000 a month? How can we get ourselves to that point?
Yeah, so the first thing that you will probably want to do is like I said, when you find the machine is giving you more out or giving you the £10 out for every pound you put in, if you're happy with that ratio of 1 to 10, that's your target ROAS, you can continue to scale your budget, your allocation of spend towards ads, as long as it's still meeting your profitability goals, right? So we would raise our target ROAS or our T ROAS to a profitable level, and make sure that we're still increasing our budget. So it's funny, sometimes you'll see a campaign says limited by budget in Google, and people think, oh, what does that mean? Like something's gone wrong. Oftentimes, if you are meeting your target return on ad spend, but there's just more demand out there than your daily budget allows you to reach, then that's a great sign. That means you're limited by your ability to, or your willingness to spend. But if it's profitable, scale it up. So we advise scaling it up by about 20% every couple of weeks. So let it play out for 14 days. Then if it's still profitable, adjust it by another 20% up. And so that's like a rule of thumb. There's no, definitive answer that we get from Google on that kind of stuff, but you can kind of play it safely and make sure that you don't throw the campaign metrics completely out of whack by just, quadrupling your budget on day one. So I found out that by doing that, we got to the point where in some of our businesses, we've had points where we're spending literally thousands of pounds per day on ads, which to a beginner who's just launching might think, I can't afford to do that. But you don't do that from day one. You start with £20 per day, then it's 30. Then after 2 weeks, maybe it goes to 50. Then it goes to maybe 70. Then it's 100, right? So you're gradually working your way up. And if it's still saying, hey, there's more search demand traffic for these products here, and we're meeting your profitability goals, you get to the point where some days we've had where we've made £30,000 in sales from maybe £1,500 in ad spend, right? So that is that's more than the 10-to-1 ratio that we were talking about before, right? So that's the thing to remember, that your allocation or your marketing budget can be unlimited, dependent on a profitable return on ad spend for that. So that's how we scale up gradually and profitably. Once we do that, how we make it sustainable, to answer the second part of your question, is if you want the lifestyle that we create, that we designed this business to create for us, then at some point you will want to onboard additional team members. And so virtual assistants are perfect for this kind of role. So the first time I hired a virtual assistant from the Philippines, I hired somebody, we used the website onlinejobs.ph, and we posted a job ad, and we had flooded with applicants. I did it all wrong the first time. In week 6 of our program now, we have like the templates, the job spec ad, how we do it, the recruitment funnel, all that kind of thing. But something that I did early is when I first hired my first VA, I just recorded a video of me going through the customer support inbox, because we were getting quite a few customer support emails and requests for products and things. Just recorded myself doing it with a voiceover like this, and then just gave them like 3 hours of video and just said, just watch this. This was me going through what I'm doing every day at the moment. It was taking me maybe a couple of hours a day to go through the emails. And they just watched like 3 days of me doing that. And they were like, I think I understand how your brain works now. It's almost like that scene in The Matrix where Neo is like, I need to learn to fly this helicopter. And they're like, I don't know how to fly it. And then he just uploads the information. And then suddenly he's like, oh yeah, I can do it now. Just gets in and flies it. So that's kind of the same method. You're trying to like download your thought patterns to your virtual assistant so that they can just continue from where you left off. Now, we have a lot more structured ways we do that now, where rather than just bombard them with hours of content, we'd create specific standard operating procedures using tools like Asana, where we'd give them like a 12-step checklist of how to deal with a product return, for example. Or if a customer has a query, how do you figure that query out from them, so that we can create frequently asked question portals on our websites. Or we can even show the virtual assistant how to liaise with our supplier to get the answer to the question and then go back to the customer, so that it doesn't matter where you are. You could be on a flight, on a beach, on holiday, running, playing football, whatever. You're still getting paid for the time for whilst your business is running, but not for your time. You're no longer trading time for money. So that's how we achieve that output and scale up profitably and sustainably.
Sustainably is a big point there as well. As you grow, you also add a lot of admin in terms of fulfilling those orders. So you make it sustainable by downloading all of your information into Loom videos, into processes, and then your VAs can pick it up. I recently-ish hired a new VA, and she tells me that she's watched that many videos of me that she almost spends the whole weekend with me, because I'm not available necessarily on the weekend, but she's watching all of the videos of all the processes I've put together, so that anything that happens in the business, the ideal aim is that I've already done that. I've recorded how I did it, and then she can watch that and know exactly how to do it herself. I love that side of things. I love how exciting it is when you can hand a job away, know that it will get done as well as you've done it, if not better, and then you can continue on actually the growth tasks for the rest of the time, which is so exciting. And also your point about getting the numbers right to a point where you're profitable and having an unlimited ad budget because you know you're going to receive more back, then again, the numbers you can start to see growing in your Google Ads account. It's really exciting to see that. So now we've literally been from how do we start, what's the first actions we take, all the way through now to having a profitable ad return and scaling it sustainably. So there's lots of actionable steps in there. What else would you say, Lewis, in terms of how can people really support themselves in growing a business like this?
Well, yeah, we've covered as much as we can realistically cover in a podcast episode today. But if you're listening to us and you're thinking, okay, I like it, I'm ready to start, let's do it. I think the best thing you can do is learn from others who've already achieved your goals. We've given you a glimpse today into some of the lessons, the learnings, the experiences that we've had, but we've done one better than that and put it into a step-by-step tactical hands-on training where we guide you through, like I said, hours of over-the-shoulder tutorials. I think we've got 30 plus hours of content guiding you through how to take this from just an idea right through to a profitable business that you are then removed from, and frees up your time and ability to spend your time with whoever you want, wherever you want on the planet. So if that sounds like something you'd want to do, and you'd prefer to shortcut the route to success rather than trying to figure this out in the expensive, time-consuming, high-risk way, and you'd want that support from us, but also the tactical training and the steps to actually do it, then the best thing you can do is head to dropshipunlocked.com/free to learn more. Watch the video there. We'd love to help you get started on your journey and help you like we've done for so many hundreds of our existing members already.
Yeah, that's the reality. There will be setbacks, there will be challenges as you go through the process of growing a business. So for me, it was so important to have people around me that were on the same journey and able to ask questions of people who had already been through those steps is just a massive hack. And on that point, we're now going to answer a question from a listener in just a moment.
Just a quick heads up, if you'd like to share your questions, stories, successes, or challenges, you can email us directly at podcast@dropshipunlocked.com. And you never know, we might even feature you on the next podcast episode.
Also, if you want access to today's show notes or any of the resources we've mentioned in the episode today, then head over to dropshipunlocked.com/podcast. We also have a small favour to ask of you. If you enjoyed the show so far, you could take a minute to leave us a rating and review on your podcast platform of choice.
You wouldn't believe how much your reviews help us grow the podcast. We'll even read out some of our favourites on the next episode. So if you want to be featured on the show, please do go ahead and leave us a review today. Thanks so much for your support. We really couldn't do it without you, and we absolutely love hearing what you think of the podcast.
Okay, so now we're into the part of the show where we answer a question from a listener. And this question is in from James C. And he's actually asked a couple of questions. So he is interested in finding out about how you can run a dropshipping business alongside a full-time job. And the specific questions he has, there's a couple, so I'll read them both out for you, Lewis. The first one is, how do you manage your time between the admin tasks of running a business, and how do you then manage that alongside the tasks for growth? And then the second part of his question is, how do you deal with customer service when you're still in a full-time job and you don't yet have a VA in place?
Great question, James C. So thank you for that. The managing your time whilst running a dropshipping business and having a full-time job is a challenge that I've certainly experienced. And I think that there are certain things you need to do. So firstly, you've got to prioritize the ongoing needs of the business to make sure that it is managed well and sustainable, so that you can free up your time to then focus on the growth things that only you can do really well as the business owner. So things like handling customer service questions. You're going to start to get customer service questions coming through, sales inquiries, product questions, things like that coming through. And that's really good. But if you can set accurate expectations for response time, so if you can have like a template email that goes out automatically after a request comes in that says, we usually get back to customers within 24 to 36 hours, something like that, then at least you're being honest with them from the outset. That way, what I would try and do is then batch responses into the time that you do have available. So if you're working a really intense job, and often it's more than 9 to 5, it might be like 8 till 8, realistically, the time that you're away from home. When you do have that time, sit down, set a timer on your phone. This is what I always do. Open up the inbox, give yourself an hour or half an hour, depending on how many emails you have, and just do that. Do nothing else. Don't get distracted by anything else. Don't have anything on in the background. Just set that timer, put your phone on airplane mode, and work through trying to get through as many of those questions as you can. And anything that you think, hey, this could have been answered with a template, save that answer for later. So you have a list, like a bank of template responses. And anything that you think, hey, we could create that automatically. We could have a section on our website that does that. Or I could use Zapier or Make or one of these automation tools to actually make sure that that doesn't even need to become a question. Then go ahead and do that. One of the things that I used to do is have the phone line for our company go to a voicemail that on the voicemail, it just said, please send us an email, right? So you're kind of directing people from the phone through to the inbox, because I didn't yet have a virtual assistant and I wasn't available to take calls. That way, when you get to the end of the day, you don't have a load of voicemails and customers you need to respond to. Instead, you just have emails, because you've almost funneled the customer support down to one channel that you can then manage. Eventually, you will be able to then hire a VA, and you can have them sitting on live chat and answering calls and responding to emails. But before then, the best advice I can have is try and funnel that through to one platform, and as much of it as you can, try and template, automate, so that it makes your job of getting through that process in, say, half an hour a day totally manageable.
Awesome. Thank you, Lewis. And a moment to say, if you do have a question for us on the podcast, then the way you get your question in is by emailing podcast@dropshipunlocked.com. And we'll be answering your questions on an upcoming podcast coming up soon. Okay, and we also have a listener review to read out on the podcast today. And this review is in from William C. And he said, hi guys, big fan of your work. I truly believe that dropshipping is a part of my future, and I'm preparing myself for the time when the time comes. I hope you have a successful application to your program. And also thank you for releasing these podcast episodes. They're invaluable to someone like me who's interested but has only worked a very vocational, specialised job in the past. Many thanks. Well, thank you so much, William, for your kind review. That is the reason why we put together these episodes, to help people out and to help out where we were a few years ago. We'd love these podcast episodes to be available for us. We just have to go back in time a few years to know exactly where you're coming from. So thank you so much, William, for your review.
Yeah, thank you so much for the review, William. We're really happy to see that you found the podcast helpful. So if you'd like to hear your review broadcast on our podcast, then leave us a rating and review on whichever platform you're tuning in from, or a comment on our YouTube channel. And remember as well, if you could pass this episode along to someone you care about, perhaps there's someone in your life who's been contemplating starting their own venture and just needs that extra push of motivation or inspiration, then share the positivity and assist them in embarking on their own entrepreneurship journey.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of the Dropship Unlocked podcast. We hope you found today's episode useful and inspiring.
Remember, if you're ready to take the next step towards creating your own high-ticket dropshipping business, our step-by-step mentorship program can help. Just head to dropshipunlocked.com/free to learn more and get started on your own journey to financial independence.
Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss another episode, and leave us a review if you've enjoyed what you hear today. We love hearing from our listeners, and we'll even read out some reviews on the next episode.
And finally, thanks for choosing to spend your time with us today. We really appreciate you, and we'll be back soon with more valuable insights and tips on high-ticket dropshipping.